Hi everyone. I remember when I got this play button back in 2016. It's something YouTube used to do as a way to encourage creators. See? Signed there personally by Susan. But I wanted to make it a little more special, so I made that insane art video for my fans, which rightfully got age restricted. If you matter, you know which one I'm talking about. But eventually YouTube went further into its corporatization process and their ambition to become like TV. They stopped handing out play buttons to YouTubers whenever they reach a certain benchmark with subscribers. You can't get these anymore. You also can't get verified nowadays. You know that little check mark next to the username? Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore other than as some kind of legacy with the oldest channels. They also stopped doing YouTube Rewind as it was getting more and more replaced with people who don't actually represent the platform. The ones in most recent years got such crazy dislike ratios by the site's own users, it was embarrassing. So now they've stopped doing them completely, but they've also shown in many ways that YouTube is done with YouTubers. It is so sad to think that Filthy Frank couldn't even exist in today's landscape because his obvious satirical retard humor would be flagged down as hate speech. The CEO now brags that only half the site's views come from YouTubers. She's spoken with disdain of independent journalism, and in 2019 they made it official YouTubers will no longer be recommended for breaking news. So independent commentators now just have a 7% chance of making the top 10 search result for a newsworthy item like Brexit, while established old media outlets are over 10 times more likely to be recommended. Combined with this, they've started doing ads on channels that aren't even monetized. So you'll have ads playing on your videos, someone is making money off of you, you just won't earn a dime from it. That's been the case for years, though I can recall several of my videos having ads way back, even though I didn't have them monetized. But now it's blatantly established as policy. I've talked about the intricacies of soft censorship and how the shadow ban system works in more detail here in this prior video. Just click up there if you're rolling your eyes right now, because you will be proven wrong and you need it the most. It's been a thing for a while, but this year with the new Corona policy is where they've confirmed views are removed and reduced with political videos where so-called authority hasn't been established. And now YouTube announced it will block and remove content that contains statements alleging widespread fraud or errors might have changed the outcome of historical US election. This caused outrage even amongst anti-Trump people. Rolling Stone contributor Matt Taibbi wrote a great article that's mandatory reading for anyone planning to chime in on this. Quote, YouTube's announcement came down at roughly the same time that Hunter Biden was announcing his so-called tax affairs were under investigation by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Part of that investigation concerned whether or not he violated tax and money laundering laws in China. This information was in the catch of emails reported in a New York Post story blocked by Twitter and Facebook, news that was denounced as Russian disinformation by virtually everyone in reputable media, who often dismissed the story with an aristocratic snort. That tale was not Russian disinformation, however, and Biden's announcement this week strongly suggests that Twitter and Facebook suppressed a real story of legitimate public interest just before a presidential election. How important was that story? That's debatable, but the fact that tech companies blocked it and professional journalists gleefully lied about it has a direct bearing on YouTube's decision now to bar Trumpist freakouts over the election results. If you want a population of people to stop thinking an election was stolen from them, it's hard to think of a worse method than ordering a news blackout after it's just been proven that the last major blackout was a fraud. Just close your eyes and imagine what would have happened if Facebook and Google banned the 9/11 truth movement on the advice of intelligent officials in the Bush years. And it'll start to make sense that Trump voters in Guy Fawkes masks are now roaming the continent like buffalo. End of quote. Or as I'd like to phrase it, if you can't compete with someone else's fake news, then what does that say about the quality of your own truth? If something is fake, it's easy to prove it, and doesn't leave tough questions unanswered. We are now living in a world where the documentary Zeitgeist would be considered some kind of terrorism, rather than an interesting take on world politics. Don't tell me this is just gonna affect conservatives. From the outside, fighting evil conspiracy theories about the election sounds great, right? Fine and dandy. Except for details like this. The legal team led by attorney Sidney Powell plans to appeal the dismissal of an Arizona election lawsuit by an Obama-appointed federal judge on December 9th. In a completely different article and context, you learn Evelyn Farkas, a former Obama administration defense official, admitted under oath that she lied during an MSNBC interview about having evidence that Trump campaign staff was colluding with the Russians. Now, I'm being nice to you as a viewer by providing only one example here. Let's not make this video an hour long because I have to include all the other possible ones. Since I made my election video, I've had professional leftards comment, "Fake news. Fake. This is fake. It's been proven in court." Oh, you mean leftist courts appointed by leftists who want Joe Biden to win at any cost? Doesn't seem to hold that much water, does it? I mean, you sure wouldn't be content if it was the other way around, would it? George Soros has been sponsoring prosecutors all over America so they can go easy on Antifa and BLM looters. I'll make a more in-depth video about this topic in the near future, but for now, it's a pretty easy example to prove courts by themselves aren't a metric for truth. Justice process tends to be more complex than that, as there's multiple layers of justice in America signified by county, state, and federal court. Point being, the partisan underwear reek quite heavily of your ideological skid marks here, so don't tell me I'm wrong when you wouldn't accept these premises given the opposite situation. When you read Buddhist refugee media, dissident media such as the Epoch Times, meaning anti-commie, anti-China media, you get a whole other take on the election fraud issue than any Western media is willing to offer you. There is a lot of evidence to raise questions, but you're not even allowed to raise questions anymore, which is annoying to me, especially given Western media has dubbed Epoch Times right-wing extreme, which is like calling a Jewish paper extreme while the Holocaust is happening. The people who are having their organs illegally harvested by China decided to start up a media company, and you have the goddamn nerve to label them extremist? That says far more about Western media and its Chinese-duped influence than anything does. So I was forced to delete my video on the American election since YouTube now has yet another policy based on progressive talking points. And given I've already been handed a strike for one of my most epic vintage foreigner reports, the one on tie-dye witches exploiting refugee children, somehow revealing creepy patterns in society is now considered harassment. And I don't see the point in taking any further risks. Things are getting pretty predictable at this point, and I'm just gonna redirect people to my BitChute, Minds, and Library accounts, where I also upload, and where videos don't get deleted based on guidelines that are never applied seriously anyway. If YouTube cares so much about fake news, why are they allowing North Korea to run a channel where they portray the country as a socialist paradise? And not just one, I found two. If you're banning COVID-related videos for accurately claiming that vitamin D, C, and zinc can help prevent COVID complications, why are you allowing North Korea to claim that ginseng, together with traces of gold and platinum, can cure AIDS, Ebola, MERS, and tuberculosis? If you claim to care about public safety, why are you ignoring the fact that North Korea looks at YouTube to discover dissidents whose families can be punished domestically? Why are you contributing to commie terrorism? Everyone's worried about extremist ads on YouTube, widespread mass media panic, but the extremist terror state of China that is doing organ harvesting of dissidents and Third Reich shit today, now, no problem having them advertise on your platform. Just showed up just casually when I was browsing your site on my phone. I don't see a lot of talk about that being problematic, even though this commie state is ruining more lives with fascism than the alt-right. Essentially, YouTube said, let's remove Nazis from the platform, while allowing Nazis to run the platform. YouTube claims to care about the public, yet they allow pro-anorexia channels to stay up. Cooney is part of the Finspo movement, which encourages eating disorders. Nothing happens. Onision has a forum where underage chicks post naked pictures of themselves, and tons of abuse victims coming forwards. So Chris Hansen is now making a documentary about him. Nothing happens. But it's really important to punish mine and others' polite political discussion out of concern for public safety. Yeah, thanks a lot. No wonder Wikipedia's founder is one of many to react strongly. He's now boycotting YouTube and instead telling people to cross over to BitChute, an increasingly popular alternative. Because when you look at YouTube's policy changes over the past years, all of a sudden, satire has become bullying and harassment, journalism has become misinformation, while scientific studies have become hate. What's funny about this, and I love the following point by Reclaim the Net, quote, "When it comes to the sources of so-called right information, YouTube CEO chose authoritative sources, meaning legacy media, many of which were downplaying the severity of coronavirus and telling the public face masks are not effective as recently as late March, only to change their rhetoric in April to position the coronavirus as much more serious and recommend wearing masks." End of quote. So the new YouTube policy is shut your mouth. If you're a normal person with a piece of truth, don't talk, because this is CNN country now. We can trust CNN. CNN can change their opinion every other week, back and forth, and you'll still be considered more inconsistent just because you are a YouTuber. On YouTube. Joe Rogan slammed the shit out of this one. YouTube will delete content going against the WHO, who were exposed to take orders from China, downplaying the epidemic. Cough, cough. The policy was recently announced by YouTube CEO, who also said anything that is medically unsubstantiated, including advising people to take vitamin C and turmeric as a cure, will be a violation of YouTube policies. And yet we have scientific studies establishing vitamin D, C, and zinc might actually help avoiding COVID complications. Not cure, not prevent you from getting it, but merely increasing chances against the most severe consequences. People shouldn't be allowed to know that just because stupid CNN didn't authorize it. In her first interview since the corona lockdown, YouTube CEO discussed how the platform has responded to the pandemic by removing thousands of videos and sending over 10 billion views to legacy media outlets. That's especially interesting considering the next article. CNN's political analyst made a point to disapprove when leaked audio of Joe Biden was published in The Intercept. At which point a Vice journalist started trolling the CNN analyst by sarcastically saying, "Yeah, it's a real dangerous precedent to reveal contradictions between Joe Biden's private statements and his public ones, because it erodes public trust in institutions." At which point the CNN analyst liked his tweets and agreed. There are two separate points I want to make here. Number one, this really goes to show how trolling can be used as a political tactic. Saying absurd things, and having people seriously agree with them, reveals more than they would think to reveal if not prompted with the situation. Just like when the "It's Okay to be White" campaign revealed racist media bias in the mainstream, this shows how far gone the people working for CNN truly are. Click the upper right corner for a more philosophical take on trolling. Nevertheless, it brings us to the following point. Number two, if a Vice journalist is smarter than you, that's how you know you really messed up. So it really says a lot about the state of things that those are the people that are allowed to control YouTube now, acting as some kind of unofficial editorial guidelines. But there's no shadow ban, right? I mean, you're just artificially restricting outreach based on its political content and making sure it's no longer the people who get to decide which video is popular through organic activity. Instead, your algorithms decide for them in the favor of mainstream companies while punishing YouTubers. That's not shadow ban. I've been dismissed as a whiny, entitled YouTuber stereotype, just complaining about lacking views. Then you read about how the New York Post had their Biden expose outright censored by Twitter. They banned the paper's account from sharing it, banned any user from sharing that article, while Facebook admitted to doing their typical thing, suppressing it so people won't be able to find it and discuss it. Facebook also recently revealed it takes racist comments against white people and men far less seriously than hateful comments against LGBT, Muslims, etc. So hating people is okay depending on skin color. You don't exactly have to look very hard to discover how Silicon Valley is a progressive shithole completely separated from the rest of the country. Yet they're the ones in control of public discourse, and in terms of democracy, that is just a powder keg waiting to blow up. This is not an isolated incident. Sky News had the same thing happen when Facebook fact-checkers chose to restrict their articles just because they included unfiltered quotes by Trump. Then you read about how a Facebook fact-checker was caught taking money from China, and suddenly things make a lot more sense. I mean, after all, the persecuted Muslims in China are far more hopeful about a Trump administration bringing attention to their injustices than they are about Biden, who has been caught colluding with their oppressors financially. Because Trump highlighted the insane persecution they face, similar to what my people faced before Srebrenica. China is doing the exact same thing, while human rights are completely disavowed. And this is all being condoned through this YouTube platform. I'm not a complete twat, so I'm not gonna act like a Swede when YouTube is outright auto-deleting comments mocking China's Communist Party. That in itself is quite substantial and telling, and you don't have accidents with an algorithm in foreign languages like that. When you read all the reports of Democrat politicians taking China money, it's pretty obvious what's going on. They've already taken over Hollywood. A movie that was supposed to show Chinese invasion instead got digitally replaced with North Korea to appease Chinese influence. And recent intelligence reveals nearly 2 million Communist Party members have infiltrated the world's biggest companies and government agencies across the West. It's pretty obvious why Tulsi Gabbard was totally censored during the election, same how Bernie Sanders got screwed over during the Democrat caucus earlier this year in Iowa. It's sad that a conservative like Steven Crowder is the one forced to ultimately address this, because nobody else wants to talk about it, not even in her own party. But the DNC has a tradition of pushing down anti-corporate Democrats who don't follow the hypocrisy and lies formula of pushing ideals you don't believe in personally. I don't like Bernie Sanders, but even to me it's so obvious his own party dislikes him even more. So don't think you leftists are safe from censorship just because it's mostly happening to conservatives right now. Just give it time. When I started complaining about shadow ban, few thought it would affect mainstream journalists, and yet here we are. Isn't it just amazing how a platform claiming to want to crack down on conspiracy theories did nothing and have said nothing about the Russia election conspiracy that's been raging on in the mainstream for the past 4 years? Are any of those videos censored? Are they being punished in algorithms after the Mueller report? Or is it just the conspiracies that you don't like? Remember the conspiracy theory about how Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and so Bush invading there is a great idea? Remember that conspiracy theory that every mainstream outlet pushed for a while and had millions of lives ruined in the Middle East, only for it to later turn out to be false? Do you remember that? There are so many times the mainstream media has been caught with lies and inaccuracies. There are so many times dissidents and citizen journalists have been proven right with time, leading to massive cover-ups and structural deficiencies being revealed. But yet YouTube now made those deceitful major companies into the baseline editorial guidelines for any other content by anyone else. 2018, YouTube officially debuted their plan to promote and fund authoritative news, meaning Das Kapital and their mainstream media major companies. 2019, they're announcing authoritative sources are 10 times more likely to top search results, and they will no longer promote YouTubers, aka independent journalism, for breaking events. 2019, YouTube CEO was caught saying, quote, "Of course, someone out of their garage can upload a video and say their point of view about what happened with the news, but we're not going to recommend that when there's a breaking news event. We're going to recommend companies that we know have a long tradition of delivering reliable news. Especially about Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, right?" Half my channel is gathering times where the media have been wrong about something, so kind of speaks to the flawed thinking here. 2020, YouTube's chief product officer is caught talking shit about the site's own users by describing them as basement-dwelling morons, basically who can't give context on the news. And he admits that non-mainstream content can expect to see their views artificially reduced because they are not considered authority. And boy, oh boy, have I noticed that. When I ask subscribers about notifications, at least circa half complain about not getting them, even with all settings filled in. But keep in mind, these are the people who actually got to see my community post. A lot of people aren't even aware that tab exists, nor how much uploads they miss out on. I recently made a community post showing people how in the past month alone, I've had over 1,000 people unsubscribed. While at the same time, loads of people are telling me, why was I unsubscribed from your channel? I watch your videos all the time, as well as I turned the bell on with all notifications, but now I notice even my subscription is gone. And whenever I try speaking out about this, it just gets messy. Either people get it, because they're already well read on the topic, or they object with endless hyper-personal takes. I know it be known what is happening, but the shadow ban system makes even your own subscribers, people claiming to be fans, act like complete cunt nuggets. Even intelligent people who are normally perceptive will go, "Well, I always get notified." Good for you! What does that have to do with all of the hundreds of comments describing the complete opposite?
Of course people aren't interested in every video.
Never said they were.
I've stopped watching because I found your content too negative.
Great, you're a vagina. What does that have to do with the overall system that is being confirmed through YouTube's official statements, though? Then some people want to claim that the real problem is YouTube users can tell the subscription feed, which has all their subscriptions, apart from the homepage feed, which consists mainly of recommendations. And that's the real problem, except it isn't, and people make this clear whenever they want to complain to me. So, no. What the comment section genius doesn't understand is that I've always had people unsubscribe for all possible reasons. I've always been told I'm too negative, too vulgar, getting bored with your content, etc. Never stopped my channel growth before. Until a specific year where you started finding these official statements, and it started happening to other creators as well. And now I see my number of subscribers be stuck in pretty much the same spot for this entire year. It's been 230k all year. But you gotta give him credit. I mean, it really goes to show why Shadowban is such a genius system. Instead of the traditional bad publicity and mob with pitchforks gathering on Twitter, forcing YouTube to address the issue whenever their favorite creator gets censored, we now have those same people instead going, "But you're not banned. Nothing's happening here. YouTube is perfect. Stop being a conspiracy theorist." Which only furthers the soft censorship, keeps that system alive, makes it harder to get any justice on this, and keeps positive change from happening. I used to have 100k average on my videos, then this year it dropped to 60k, and now it's 30k. So my outreach is just getting worse and worse, but instead of spreading the word, or letting other people know, discussing this problem, and making it known as one of the bigger threats to democracy today, they instead help YouTube do it by putting the blame on you. Instead of making it hard for the public to ignore, they just say plain stupid shit disguised as reasonable doubt. YouTube has shown themselves to be extremely sensitive to criticism even from right-wing Twitter mobs, so it makes sense they would do passive-aggressive censorship rather than outright censorship. Because the latter brings bad publicity and public critique, while the foremost makes the censored look like a nutjob. But people forget, I'm not just a YouTuber. I'm a YouTube user. I love this site as much as anyone else, and I've been on it since 2005. And I've seen this affect my favorite channels, which have nothing to do with politics. Horror channels, for example. Rob Dyke is one of my favorites. Awesome guy, and I feel so bad for him. He was forced to change his name since politically incorrect YouTube algorithms identify his last name as hate speech. And this is the same comments I've been getting. But in Rob's case, the apocalypse hit him so hard he named YouTube in his suicide letter. Thankfully he didn't give in, but I completely understand why he would do that, as it's affected my mental health as well. Watch this video if it's confusing to you in any way. If you understand what it means to work on this platform, you're not surprised. Another example is a pretty harmless comedy channel, Philip Solo. Same thing here. I gave you tons of more in my prior video on Shadowban that I'm sure a lot of people weren't notified about, so if you're still doubting me, check that one out. When YouTube chose to become family-friendly, it ended up hurting not just the family-friendly conservatives, but also the general creative entertainment that made this site so great. Filthy Frank could not exist today, and that just says everything there is to say about how the algorithms have changed. And it's so pathetic how they made YouTube Kids to separate YouTube from its younger users, but then they just made YouTube itself YouTube Kids. I used to be able to discover people like Frank Yang on YouTube. Weird, smaller channels with very odd, amazing entertainment, but in the past year I've noticed how it's worse than ever. Recommendations are now so stale, so bad, you'll never discover anything new, just more of what you're already watching, and only the parts of it that are safe. My feed is flooded with cooking channels and jazz music. And every time you do see something new, go to the comment section and find a top comment going, "Who else is here because of the algorithm?" I've noticed that so many times, and it's so obvious that they're just rolling out the same recommendations to everyone right now. They really are trying to make YouTube television, and this is the corporatization aspect of Shadowban. It does not just hurt conservatives, it primarily hurts smaller creators, original creators. It's more an issue of fun rather than politics. But once you start caring too much about the latter, it will inevitably impact the former. And it's just getting creepier and creepier. All I can hope for at this point is that people remember to check my channel manually and don't forget I exist. Because I have tons of unique video reports, interviews, and books planned. I'm just scared nobody's gonna be notified about it.